Hi, boys and girls. It's good to see your faces again in front of me. All of your photos are here on the table, so if I look down instead of at the camera, it's because I'm looking at you. Today we're going to have another lesson about Esther, and I hope that you remember what we talked about last week, how, of course, Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman, because he knew as a Jewish man he should only bow down and honor God. And so a terrible law was written where all the Jews in Babylon would be, or in Persia, would be put to death on a particular day, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. So Mordecai had been very, very sad about that, had torn his clothes, sat in scratchy sackcloth clothes, put ashes all over him. When Queen Esther found out what he was so upset about, she was upset too. And Mordecai wanted her to go to the king and please try to talk him out of this. And she knew, and she reminded Mordecai that no one was allowed to go in and talk to the king unless he asked them to come. She knew that she could be in danger of dying if she went in without being invited to come. So she asked all the Jews in Persia, there in Susa, to please fast for 3 days, to not eat anything. And typically when one person would fast, they would pray as well. She knew she needed God's strength and God's wisdom to be able to do this difficult thing that she should do. And Mordecai had reminded her that maybe she was queen just for this purpose, to save her people from being killed. So Esther got up after the 3rd day of fasting. She got dressed beautifully, I'm sure, and she went to the inner court outside the king's rooms, where his throne was and everything. And she was ready to approach the king. Maybe she was very nervous and very afraid because she didn't know what he would say. And as the king looked up from his throne, he saw her through the doorway. And he said, "Queen Esther, come in." Well, that was a good sign. And so as she approached, he held out his royal golden scepter. And that meant she was welcome to be there. He was glad she was there. And she touched the very top of the scepter. And so they began to talk. Now, the king wondered why she had come, because he too knew that this was a risky thing to do. And he said, "Queen Esther, what is it you would like? I will give you half my kingdom if that's what you want." And she said, "Oh, king, well, what I want is I would like for you and Hamaan, your advisor, to come to a banquet that I have prepared for all of us." And so the king said, "Yes, we will be there." So he notified Hamaan, and he and Hamaan showed up at the right time and began to eat the delicious food that had been prepared for them. A banquet is kind of like a fancy meal. And so she had delicious foods that were prepared. And as they ate and as they drank, again, King Ahasuerus said, "Well, Queen Esther, now tell me, what would you like? Would you like half my kingdom?" And she said, "Well, O king, what I would really like is for you and Hamaan to come to another banquet with me tomorrow." And so they both agreed. Now, Hamaan had come to the first banquet probably so quickly he hadn't had time to tell other people about it. But you know Hamaan, that problem he had with pride, oh my, he just thought he was the best of all the people that worked in the palace, he had been chosen by the queen to come and eat with her and the king. So he couldn't wait to go home and tell his family and his friends and his neighbors how he had been chosen not just once to eat with the king and queen, but 2 times. So he was so excited and full of pride, and he left the palace, and there he saw at the gate of the palace Mordecai. Mordecai, who would not bow down to him. And that happy feeling Haman had one minute was now changed to anger and hatred. So he continued on home, and just like he planned, he got his family together and his friends and his neighbors, and he told them the good news about being invited to eat with the king and the queen, how he had done that day, and now he was going to do it the next day as well. He was so proud. He just thought he was the best. But then he told his wife Zeresh about Mordecai, about seeing him as he was leaving the palace, and how it made him feel so angry and full of hate, and how he wished that he could just go ahead and kill Mordecai before that date of the 13th day of the 12th month. But the wife came up with a bad plan. She said, well, why don't you have gallows built? And then tomorrow when you go to the palace, you can ask the king if you can go ahead and have Mordecai hung on the gallows. So that's what Haman did. He thought that was a great idea. And he ordered workmen to build these gallows. And they were really tall, 50 cubits high, very, very tall. Gallows is a structure or a platform where a person is led to, and then a rope is hung over it, and the rope is hung around the person's head, and then the person is pushed off, and then the person dies. Hanging is a terrible death, and we don't do that in America anymore, but in all parts of the world at one time or another, people were hanged for different reasons. And so this is what Zeresh told Haman that she thought he should do to Mordecai. So Haman goes off to bed thinking about, maybe by this time tomorrow, Mordecai will be gone. And in the meantime, in the palace, the king was having trouble going to sleep. Have you ever had a hard time falling asleep at night? It just seemed like you tossed and turned, and no matter what you did, you couldn't fall asleep. That happened to me one night this week because I drank coffee that wasn't decaf coffee, and it kept me up all night long. And boy, that was a miserable, long night. But sometimes people can't sleep because they are worried about someone, or they're excited about something. All different kinds of reasons people get excited, and or afraid or worried, and they can't sleep. So whatever reason the king had for not being able to fall asleep, he thought, maybe if I have someone read to me, that will help me fall asleep. So he asked some servants in the palace to get the records of the happenings in the area where he was king, while he was king. Records are sort of like diaries and journals. They're books or parchments that people have written things down on to remind people about things that happened previously. So any important things that had happened while King Ahasuerus had been on the throne were written down in these records. So as the servant is writing down or reading these things that were written down to the king, he got to the part where it told about how someone named Mordecai had come and told the people at the palace about how two men who were gatekeepers there at the palace had been plotting to kill the king. And when this man heard them talking, he thought, I better go warn the king. And so because of that, these men who had this bad idea of killing the king were killed, and the king, of course, survived. And so the king said, this man named Mordecai that revealed this terrible plot to kill me, what did we ever do for him to show him how grateful we were? And the servant said, well, nothing was done for him. And the king said, oh, well, tomorrow we'll figure out something to do for this man. So the king goes to sleep. And the next morning, when he got up, he was on his throne, and he thought, I'll ask one of my advisors what I should do to honor someone who's done something great. And while Haman is walking to the palace, all excited about the banquet and all excited about maybe getting permission to have Mordecai hung, well, he got into the throne room of the king, and the king had a question for him before Haman could ask his question. And he said, Haman, I have a question. I need advice. He said, if I wanted to show someone how much I appreciated him, and I wanted to honor him in a great way so that everyone would know how special I thought this person was, what do you think I should do? Well, Haman, that guy who thought he was the greatest, thought the king was talking about him. And he said, oh, king, well, I think you should take one of your royal robes and put it on this man. And I think you should get one of your horses that you have ridden, and I think you should let this man sit on the horse. And then I think one of the advisors should take him through town saying, this is the way the king honors someone important. Well, the king liked that idea. And he said, Haman, that's what we'll do. He said, I want you to go get a robe and get one of my horses and find Mordecai. And I want you to put the robe on Mordecai, and I want you to put him on my horse, and I want you to take him throughout the city of Susa, telling everyone that the king is honoring this man for doing something great, and that the king really appreciates what he did. Oh my, can you imagine how Haman felt? He was so embarrassed, but of course he had to obey what the king told him to do. And so sure enough, he got a robe, he got one of the king's horses, he knew right where to find Mordecai, and he told Mordecai, here's a robe you must put on, then sit on the horse. And then Haman himself took Mordecai, his enemy, throughout town, telling all the people that were watching how important he was to the king, how the king was honoring him. I'm sure Mordecai didn't expect that day, and certainly Haman didn't expect it either. And finally, the job was done. And Haman left to go home, humiliated, embarrassed. Oh, it was the last thing in the world he wanted to do, to honor Mordecai. But he had done it, and now he went home to tell his family. And then, as he's telling them what had happened, servants from the palace came to him and said, Haman, it's time for the queen's banquet for you and the king to attend. And so Haman left with the servants to go back to the palace. And next week we'll find out what happens at the second banquet. Well, before I end, I do want to share a verse with you today, and the verse says, whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find honor. And righteousness means doing the right things, doing the things that God would want you to do. And kindness, of course, you know what that means. That means being nice, doing what's right, treating other people the way you want to be treated. And pursue means to go after it with all your heart. So this verse is telling us that if we really want to do what God wants us to do, and if we are kind to other people, then we will be honored. Now, maybe not everybody in the world will honor us, but God will. In His own way, He will honor us, and we will have His approval. So boys and girls, this is something you can't do on your own strength. This is something that you need God's help with. It's something I need God's help with all the time, is to do what's right in God's eyes, and to be kind to others, and to go after righteousness and kindness with all my heart. I hope that's something you want too, and I hope that you're all well. I hope you're having a good time at home, and I do hope we get to see each other soon. You have a good week. Bye-bye.